Joining us now is research fellow at the Roe Institute, Alan Mendenhall, and Republican candidate for New York State Assembly, District 30, Brandon Castro. Brandon, let me start with you. Now, you know, when we look at just the sheer numbers, yes, New York is right up there. But when you break it down, you know, per 1,000 people, it's not that bleak. But, you know, the thing that you do see is that in places where they have sort of open welfare systems, you just sit back and collect welfare and other employment benefits. Why would people work if they're able to do that and collect, you know, the handouts for twice the amount of time as other states?
That's right. You know, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on here today. But that is a very, very key fact. You know, New York is a huge state. Often people think of New York as just the 5 boroughs within New York City here. I am the Republican candidate running for New York City. But New York is huge. We have upstate, we have like the Long Island portions. And what we are seeing is that a lot of these blue states are driving a lot of the investments that we have here. They are creating jobs, but then once we start to tax them more, people are starting to leave because capital can move. But the problem is that the working families can't. And what we're seeing here is a crisis. It's not just a jobs crisis, it's an education crisis. It's an affordability crisis. And we need people like me to talk about the common sense.
Yeah, well, I remember AOC crowing with excitement about how she had, you know, forced, I believe it was Amazon, to not move into her district with all their high-paying jobs, and I couldn't quite understand that. But Alan, you know, the Big Apple right behind California and the sheer number of unemployed residents, both of those states give the eligible workers up to 26 weeks of unemployment benefits. Florida, you take a look at that, it caps it at 12. So, you know, as I was asking Brandon, you know, how much does this impact people not having the impetus to go back into the workforce because they are getting the money that they need at that point for a long time?
Well, high tax, high regulation cities and states have experienced substantial domestic out-migration, and part of it's because it's just expensive to live in these places. So New York, California, these are some of the places where people are leaving, and they're going to Texas, Florida, Tennessee, South Carolina, different places in the Sun Belt. And if you look at the reasons, it's, you know, it's taxes, it's housing costs, it's regulation, it's crime, and even in some places, quality of life. If federal programs, if you look at federal programs, the ones that were designed to reduce poverty, like you just mentioned, programs in these cities that are meant to reduce poverty, if you look at federal programs, what they actually did, welfare expansion, created greater dependency, more single-family parents, persistent poverty, because what happens is you get these policies and they're billed as something that's going to help the poor, but what they end up doing is they end up penalizing investment, penalizing work, restricting housing supply, increasing taxes, rewarding dependency, and reducing the consequences for disorder. And basically, people respond to incentives, and those are negative incentives, and negative consequences will follow negative incentives.
Yeah, Brandon, you know, as New York City in particular keeps on coming up with more ways to give people who, you know, aren't working more things, I was shocked because literally in the past couple of weeks even, you can't walk a block in Midtown Manhattan, you know, where all these businesses, you can't walk a block without stepping over someone who is homeless, is facing some mental health crisis and yelling to themselves. It's just become overwhelming here. And it doesn't seem that throwing money at the problem is fixing it.
I agree with everything that you have said here. You know, I was born and raised in Woodside. I happen to live in Massachusetts now, and I'm right in the center of Queens, right in the heart of the 5 boroughs here. You walk just 5 minutes away from here. You see all the prostitution, a lot of the garbage dumping going on here. The quality of life concerns that has absolutely disrupted a lot of the hard-working families here. And we see that all throughout the 5 boroughs here. And what we have seen is the lack of priority and a lack of support for the police presence, a lack of support for the education that we have here. So not only are we driving away jobs, investment, capital, but we're also being extremely silent when it comes to the real crime statistics. We're seeing people saying that the crime is lower, but we have hard-working families here. We have parents, brothers, fathers, sisters that don't want to go out here anytime past 8 o'clock here, and we know exactly why that is.
Yeah. Alan, let's also talk about this one because this is, I think, going to shift California's demographics in a big way. Proposition 40. So big name for basically tax the rich. However, when you read the fine print in the actual proposition, it says that they're starting with the billionaires, but that at any point the legislature could reduce the amount of wealth you have and that they could tax. The supporters say, hey, we need this money from the, I think there's 256 billionaires now in California. I'm sure that number's going to be decreasing, but we need it for health. We need it for education. We need it for a lot of things. Opponents are raising millions to defeat it. Here is Congressman Ro Khanna on that move. Listen.
The California Democratic Party and the California labor movement just stood with Bernie Sanders and me in supporting a 5% wealth tax on 250 California billionaires. What this shows is that California voters want a Democratic Party that will stand up for the working class over the billionaire class.
Yeah, well, billionaire Mark Cuban, who does not live in California but has invested heavily in startup companies, says he will not. If this passes, he says, it doesn't directly impact me at all. I won't be a Cali resident, but you can bet if I'm investing in a multi-billion-dollar startup, I'm asking them to move from California first. And so he says, in my opinion, if it passes, only idiot startup founders stay in Cali. I've done it before. I'll do it again. Dallas, Pittsburgh, Indiana. I will not make being in California a prerequisite, or I will make not being there a prerequisite for investment. So, Alan, taxing the ultra wealthy, is that going to do it? I mean, they're probably the folks who have the easiest time moving away.
Well, on Ro Khanna, I'll say there's something maliciously ironic about a man who arrives on the national stage as the beneficiary of the very capitalist machinery that carried him from the son of immigrants to Ivy League lawyers and Stanford lecturer and Silicon Valley congressman. And then having climbed to the top of the ladder, he turns around to denounce the ladder as a public nuisance requiring immediate government intervention and taking. That just is wild. But wealth is usually a sign of productive capital. We don't have too many monarchs and landed gentry and hereditary aristocracy anymore. I know we have Prince, Harry, who's over there in California, but he doesn't count. He got the boot. But billionaires who run businesses, they create jobs, they create products, they bring in investment, and taxing their wealth is just going to affect the productive processes that create wealth. If you look at other countries that tried this, they basically all repealed them. Places like Austria and Denmark and Finland and Iceland and Sweden, they all tried this, and it turned out that they got lower than expected revenue. The administrative costs were high, and all the rich people left. And guess what? People are already leaving California in droves. I mean, over 800,000 left in 2021 and 2022, around 700,000, just under 700,000 in 2023, and a lot in 2024. People are fleeing California, and California's got this amazing weather. Like, you've got to do really bad stuff to get people to leave a climate like that, but they're taking their investment elsewhere, and they're taking their talent elsewhere, and understandably so. And one thing that's also really nefarious about this law is that it applies to people from January 1st, 2026. So it applies retroactively. So it's not
retroactive.
Like right now. Yeah, it's retroactive. So you're going to get all these lawsuits that are going to cost a lot of money to the state anyway, because people are going to say, look, if I had noticed that this was going to go in place, I would have moved a long time ago.
Well, there were some that did move as soon as that was announced. They got out of there as fast as they could. Brandon, in New York, who can forget that video of Mamdani standing in front of a billionaire's apartment, his second apartment, and saying, we're going to tax the heck out of this guy. And that person then came out and said, well, that billions of dollars I was going to invest in New York, I don't think I'm going to be doing that now. Now, he was able to pass through this special tax on secondary apartments, but a judge has temporarily blocked it. The city says it's going to continue with the tax implementation, and both New York and California have high unemployment rates, and if they raise the taxes on the wealthy business owners that are threatening to leave the states, who is going to be left to fund all of this free stuff that's not free?
Exactly. We need a common sense back over here. Is something that has been lacking for such a long time already. We have people like Mamdani that want to drive away the investment that we have here, and my fellow co-star here said it very, very well. It's not just about defending the billionaire class. It's about defending the hardworking families that we have here. They need the investment. They need the capital. They need the jobs here. What we don't need is people starting to move out, because what we are seeing is that if California and if this ends up successfully passing, the New York Democrats are probably going to try to follow. Hey, they're saying it's $90 billion, $100 billion that they can get here, but they're not also calculating how many people are going to be moving. What if this is successful for 2026? People are going to be moving 2027, 2028, and you're going to see it's not just the unemployment numbers, but it's how many people stay unemployed. And that's probably the biggest thing here. One of my campaign slogans is grow skills and jobs. I'm the only Gen Z candidate running in all of the 5 boroughs. And there's a reason why people having to vote the way that they are, because they need that voice to tell them why we need common sense back here, why we need an education reform, why we need a budget reform. And there should be a shift when it comes to priorities. It shouldn't just be like a contest. Mm-hmm. Which blue state can drive the most amount of billionaires, the most amount of... What the real question should be is how can we improve it? It's just, I just think there's just a lack of common sense, to be honest with you. It's terrible.
Well, we continue watching it.
I just think there's just a lack of common sense, to be honest with you. It's terrible.
Well, we continue watching it, see if it ever rises back up. Brandon Castro are rising. A key deadline has passed. There is no new deal.